When tracing the long and colourful history of the candy people, it is essential to begin not with the citizens themselves, nor even with Princess Bubblegum, but with something far older, the candy element. In the world of Adventure Time, the foundations of civilization are inseparable from the forces that predate it. These are the primal elements: ice, fire, slime, and candy. They are not simply resources or magical curiosities, but fundamental building blocks of existence. From the ruins of the Mushroom War to the shifting ages of Oo, the elements resurface again and again, shaping the destinies of kingdoms, heroes, and ordinary creatures alike. Among them, the candy element stands out as paradoxical, sweet and nurturing on the surface, yet just as capable of suffocating control as fire, slime, or ice. To understand the candy people, one must first understand the elemental force that underlies their very being. The concept of the elements appears most explicitly in the Elements miniseries, when Patient Street Pym, the long-slumbering ice elemental, awakens and forces Oo back into elemental alignment. But the miniseries does not introduce the elements so much as reawaken them. They are always present, dormant, yet influential. The candy element existed long before Princess Bubblegum, long before the recognizable Candy Kingdom. It existed as a raw force, an energy of sweetness, comfort, and cohesion that, when concentrated, could give rise to entire societies. The same way fire spreads, ice preserves, and slime absorbs, candy binds. It is an element that seeks to enfold, to draw others into its sticky embrace. In this way, the candy element is deceptively gentle. At first glance, it appears harmless, a force of delight, sugar, and joy. Yet Adventure Time reveals again and again that elemental power is neither good nor evil. It's simply island. Just as fire can nurture warmth or burn everything to ash, candy can either nourish connection or overwhelm individuality. When Oo is restructured during the elemental crisis, the candy element demonstrates its terrifying potential. Citizens are assimilated into a saccharine utopia, stripped of conflict but also stripped of freedom. The candy element's duality, sweetness, and suffocation lies at the very root of the candy people's history. Long before bubblegum, we glimpse hints of this primordial candy energy in the substance known as the mother gum. The mother gum is the strange, bubbling mass from which Princess Bubblegum herself emerges, and it is heavily implied that it is a concentration of the candy element itself. Though little is explained outright, the mother gum is an echo of the elemental forces, a living remnant of candy essence persisting after the Mushroom War. Its existence suggests that candy energy was seeded into the ruins of Oo, just as other elemental remnants lurked in hidden corners, waiting for the right moment to manifest. The mother gum represents both creation and instability. From its gelatinous form arises not just bubblegum, but also her relatives, including her uncle Gumbold. These figures are not descendants in the biological sense, but offshoots of candy essence shaped into humanoid form. Here we see the candy element, not merely as an abstract force, but as a generative power capable of producing conscious beings. These beings are not created at random. They emerge with personalities, ambitions, and flaws. The mother gum, then, is not only the wellspring of Bubblegum's kingdom, but also the seed of conflict that will ripple across candy history. If the mother gum represents the raw, chaotic power of the candy element, Bubblegum herself represents its direction and control. But before we reach her story, it is worth pausing on what makes the candy element distinct among the four. Ice is preservation, freezing life in place. fire is change through destruction. Slime is consumption and absorption. Candy, by contrast, is cohesion. It pulls together, sweetens, softens, and stabilizes. This is why, when ooh is restructured into elemental harmony, candy becomes the dominant form. It spreads like a sticky blanket, smoothing over sharp edges, erasing conflict by coating everything in sugar. It is both comforting and horrifying. From this perspective, the candy people are not just citizens of a whimsical kingdom. They are incarnations of a cosmic principle. Their childlike innocence, their tendency toward joy and naivety, is not merely a quirk of writing. It is a direct reflection of their elemental roots. To be candy is to crave connection, to seek sweetness, to resist sharpness or bitterness. Yet, as shown in the elemental crisis, that craving can become oppressive, robbing individuals of the sharp edges that make them unique. Candy is the element of community, but also conformity. The Mushroom War, which devastated Earth and gave rise to ooh's strange new order, plays a crucial backdrop here. Though Adventure Time never fully explains the mechanics of how elemental magic interacted with nuclear devastation, the implication is that the collapse of the old world created the conditions for elemental resurgence. What had been dormant forces now had space to grow unchecked. Mutated landscapes, magical anomalies, and remnants of humanity created a fertile ground for candy essence to coalesce into something tangible. The mother gum itself may well be a byproduct of these conditions, the world's attempt to rebalance itself by letting elemental energy bubble to the surface. In many ways, the history of the candy people is inseparable from the history of Princess Bubblegum. She takes the raw material of candy essence and fashions it into civilization. But her story cannot be told without recognizing that the candy element existed before her and will exist after her. This is why, in the finale, when ooh is reshaped and nearly lost, candy persists. It is too fundamental to be erased. Even if bubblegum had never existed, something resembling candy life would have eventually emerged. This truth casts her achievements in a different light. She did not invent candy life, she directed it. The candy element's ancient presence is also underscored by the existence of Patience Street Pym and the other elementals. Each represents their element incarnate across ages, reincarnating or re-emerging in different forms. Bubblegum herself is the current candy elemental, though she is not initially aware of this role. This elevates the candy people beyond the scope of one kingdom or one ruler. They are, in a sense, eternal, a civilization tied to the cosmic balance of ooh. The fact that PB is their leader is less an accident of science and more a manifestation of candy destiny. When the elementals return in the modern timeline, the candy element proves itself not only the gentlest, but also the most overwhelming. While fire spreads and ice freezes, candy consumes in a quieter way, by transforming everything into sweetness. Ooh becomes coated in gum and frosting, its inhabitants remade as mindlessly cheerful candy citizens. This is the nightmare hidden in the heart of candy. The very quality that makes it comforting, its ability to bring joy, to unify, becomes a mechanism of erasure. Individuality dissolves into sugar. Freedom disappears beneath enforced happiness. This duality is crucial when looking ahead at the candy people's development. Their history is not simply a tale of a kingdom of cute, edible citizens. It is a history shaped by the deep paradox of the candy element itself. Every triumph they achieve, every celebration they hold, exists alongside the risk of collapse into homogeneity. Their very nature makes them fragile, but also makes them a powerful symbol of resilience. Because candy can easily break, it is constantly remade. Because candy can be devoured, it is constantly recreated. This cycle of fragility and renewal defines not only their culture, but their elemental core. The origins of the candy people, then, cannot be reduced to a single moment or figure. They are the product of an ancient cosmic force, catalyzed by the chaos of the Mushroom War and shaped into a civilization by Princess Bubblegum's guidance. Their story begins not in the Candy Kingdom, but in the raw, bubbling essence of the Mother Gum, itself a reflection of the candy element's eternal presence. Before there were banana guards, before there was peppermint butler, before there was even a throne, there was candy, sticky, sweet, paradoxical candy. To understand the candy people, as they appear in the series, naive, joyous, loyal, and fragile, is to recognize that these traits are not accidental. They are the living embodiment of the candy element. From the first moment gum bubbled in the wreckage of the old world, the candy people's destiny was written. They were always meant to be sweet, always meant to bind together, always meant to risk losing themselves in their own unity. Their history begins with the element itself, and everything that follows, kingdoms, wars, rebellions, and reconciliations, flows from that primordial truth. If the Mother Gum represents the raw primordial force of the candy element, then Princess Bubblegum is its most refined expression. She is not simply the ruler of the Candy Kingdom, she is its origin, its shaper, and its eternal anchor. Her birth marks the transition of candy essence from a chaotic bubbling mass into structured civilization. But her story is not only about governance and invention, it is about the intertwining of science, elemental destiny, and personal ambition. To understand the candy people, we must first understand the woman who made them. Princess Bubblegum's birth is unlike that of any other major figure in OO. She does not descend from a family line, nor is she crafted deliberately by another. Instead, she rises directly from the Mother Gum, a living offshoot of candy elemental matter. This act of emergence carries deep symbolic weight. She is simultaneously a child of chaos and an inheritor of cosmic balance. Unlike the mindless candy citizens she would later create, Bubblegum is born with intelligence, agency, and the ability to shape her own future. Her existence proves that the candy element, when concentrated in the right form, can produce not only life, but leadership. In many ways, Bubblegum is the first true candy person. The gum creatures that preceded her, the amorphous, unstable forms bubbling from the Mother Gum, lacked permanence or purpose. They were living candy, but not civilization. Bubblegum, however, embodies something new, consciousness fused with candy essence. Her intellect is not a random mutation, but a manifestation of the candy element's drive to cohere. Where others are soft and naive, she is sharp and calculating. Where candy normally dissolves, she endures. From the start, she is set apart. But Bubblegum's creation was not solitary. She was not the only figure born from the Mother Gum. Her Uncle Gumbold, Aunt Lolly, and Cousin Chickle all emerge from the same primordial source. These relatives play a decisive role in her history, representing alternative paths the candy element might have taken. Gumbold, in particular, is significant. Where Bubblegum uses her intelligence to nurture and protect, Gumbold uses his for ambition and domination. Their rivalry is not merely political, it is elemental. Two visions of candy life are born from the same source, one of unity through caretaking, the other of unity through authoritarian rule. At first, however, Bubblegum is alone in her vision. she takes it upon herself to cultivate the candy essence, crafting the first generation of candy people. These early citizens are not born naturally, but engineered through a fusion of gum, sugar, and science. In creating them, bubblegum does not act as a parent, but as both scientist and monarch. She shapes their minds, their bodies, and even their personalities. Her earliest creations, like the banana guards and peppermint butler, reflect her dual impulses, one toward order and protection, the other toward companionship and trust. This act of creation defines Bubblegum's character. From the very beginning, she views herself not only as ruler, but as guardian. She does not inherit her people, she builds them. This sets her apart from other rulers in Oo. The Fire Kingdom is inherited, the Ice Kingdom is seized, the Slime Kingdom is absorbed, but the Candy Kingdom is engineered. Its citizens are not accidental survivors of the Mushroom War. They are deliberate constructions, brought into being by the will of one woman. This raises deep questions about autonomy, free will, and the responsibilities of leadership, themes that will echo throughout Bubblegum's reign. Her early years as princess are marked by experimentation and trial. The candy people she creates are often fragile, prone to accidents, or too simple-minded to function independently. Yet Bubblegum perseveres. Her role as ruler is also her role as mother and inventor, constantly refining her citizens to be more resilient, more capable of living together in harmony. Over time, she achieves a delicate balance. Candy people who are childlike and naive enough to be happy under her rule, but sturdy enough to maintain the fabric of a kingdom. This balance becomes the defining characteristic of candy civilization. In these formative years, Bubblegum's genius is not limited to biology. She engineers the physical infrastructure of the Candy Kingdom: sugar brick castles, gumdrop streets, frosting towers. Each structure reflects her fusion of science and candy magic, durable yet whimsical. In this sense, the kingdom itself is as much her creation as the people who inhabit it. To walk through the Candy Kingdom is to walk through Bubblegum's mind, an orderly yet colourful vision of what candy society can be. Yet, from the very beginning, her reign is shadowed by control. Because she creates her citizens, she feels an obligation and perhaps a right to direct their lives. The candy people trust her implicitly, not only because she is their monarch, but because she is, in a sense, their origin. This blurs the line between ruler and creator, between governance and guardianship. Bubblegum herself seems torn between love for her subjects and fear of what they might become without her hand. This tension is visible even in the earliest stories of the Candy Kingdom. The constant patrols of banana guards, the watchful presence of Gumball guardians, and Bubblegum's tendency to step in whenever her people falter. The birth of Princess Bubblegum is therefore not just the origin of a character, but the origin of a philosophy. She embodies the belief that society can be built, literally built, from sweetness and structure. But she also embodies the dangers of that belief. Her genius allows the candy people to exist, but her control raises questions about whether they are truly free. The fact that she is both their ruler and their mother blurs the boundary between protection and domination. From the moment she steps out of the mother gum, this paradox defines her reign. Her relationships in these early years further highlight her role. Peppermint Butler becomes not just a servant, but a confidant, someone who represents the loyalty and secrecy embedded in candy culture. The banana guards, while often bumbling, demonstrate her reliance on structure and discipline, even when the results are imperfect. Cinnamon Bun, one of her more unstable creations, reflects the limitations of her power, no matter how much she shapes her people. Some will always resist neat categorization. Each of these figures is more than just comic relief. They are reflections of Bubblegum's attempts to bring order to chaos. But perhaps the most significant aspect of Bubblegum's birth is how it ties her to the larger cycle of the elements. As the current incarnation of the candy elemental, she is not merely a monarch, but a cosmic necessity. Her existence is part of the balance of Oo itself. This explains, in part, her extraordinary resilience, her ability to survive crises that might destroy others, and her central role in the world's ongoing survival. She is not just lucky, she is elemental. Her birth from the mother Gum is as much destiny as it is accident. As she grows into her role, Bubblegum demonstrates that she is more than a product of candy essence. She is a scientist, constantly pushing the boundaries of what is possible. Her creations are not limited to candy life. She experiments with clones, robots, and hybrids. Each experiment expands the scope of what the Candy Kingdom can be, but each also raises ethical questions. Is she giving life or manufacturing obedience? Is she nurturing her people or playing God? These questions, seeded in her birth, will haunt her throughout her reign. What makes her story compelling is not that she is flawless, but that she is conflicted. From the moment she emerges from the mother Gum, she carries the weight of two opposing forces, the nurturing impulse of candy and the authoritarian impulse of control. She wants her people to be happy, but she also wants them to be safe. She wants them to thrive, but only under her guidance. This paradox is not a flaw in her design, it is the essence of candy itself. Sweetness brings joy, but too much sweetness overwhelms. Bubblegum's life is the constant struggle to balance these truths. In this way, the birth of Princess Bubblegum is not only a personal origin story, but the birth of candy civilization itself. Without her, the candy people would be little more than unstable gum creatures bubbling in the ruins of Oo. With her, they become a society, fragile yet enduring, naive yet loyal, whimsical yet deeply tied to the cosmic forces of their world. She is their creator, their ruler, and their embodiment. From the very first moment she steps into existence, the fate of the candy people becomes inseparable from her own. Her story is not a simple tale of invention, but a reflection of the deeper themes of Adventure Time: creation and control, love and loyalty, destiny and free will. The candy people begin with her, but her creation also ensures that their history will always be bound to her choices, her experiments, and her struggles. The birth of Princess Bubblegum is therefore more than just the rise of a character. It is the crystallization of the candy element into form, intellect, and ambition. It is the moment when sweetness took shape, donned a crown, and declared itself eternal. With Princess Bubblegum's birth, the candy element finally gained form, intention, and leadership. But to transform candy essence into civilization required more than intelligence, it required structure. The early years of the Candy Kingdom were not merely about survival, but about establishing a foundation that could endure in a post-apocalyptic Oo. In this chapter, we will trace how the Candy Kingdom's institutions, infrastructure, and culture were shaped by Bubblegum's vision, blending whimsy with discipline, and how the candy people slowly grew from unstable creations into the backbone of one of Oo's most enduring societies. From the beginning, Bubblegum's ambitions were as architectural as they were biological. It was not enough to create candy people. She needed to give them a home, a symbol of order and unity. Thus arose the first version of the Candy Kingdom itself, a walled city built of sugar, frosting, and gum. The Candy Castle at its centre was not only a place of residence for Bubblegum, but also a visible sign of stability for her people. Its turrets, towers, and colourful design reflected Candy's inherent whimsy, but its sheer size and durability also reminded Ooh that the Candy Kingdom was no trivial experiment, it was here to stay. The construction of the Candy Kingdom reveals Bubblegum's dual identity as both scientist and ruler. She infused her candy architecture with durability, ensuring that her frosting towers did not melt in the sun and her gum walls did not collapse in the rain. Her scientific ingenuity turned fragile substances into building blocks of a lasting society. But more importantly, these structures symbolized protection. To the Candy people, who were soft and vulnerable, the walls of their city became a reassurance that they could live without fear of constant predation. Even if the banana guards were bumbling, the walls themselves stood strong. At the heart of these early foundations were the Gumball Guardians, towering stone figures with gumballs embedded in their chests. The Guardians were created to watch over the kingdom with unwavering vigilance. Unlike the banana guards, who were simple-minded and often ineffective, the Gumball Guardians represented raw, immovable authority. They were not merely soldiers, they were symbols. Their very existence reminded Candy citizens that their safety rested on structures larger and older than themselves. To outsiders, the Guardians communicated a different message. Despite its candy-coated surface, the kingdom was not to be underestimated. The Banana Guards, meanwhile, illustrate the other side of Bubblegum's early strategies. Unlike the towering Gumball Guardians, the Banana Guards were intentionally simple. Their personalities were bumbling, their discipline questionable, and their effectiveness inconsistent. Yet they served a crucial role. They were not meant to be flawless warriors, but accessible protectors. Citizens could see themselves reflected in their banana-shaped defenders. Their fallibility made them approachable, and their sheer numbers compensated for their lack of skill. In their imperfections, they embodied the Candy people themselves, fragile but resilient in community. Beyond military defense, Bubblegum also laid the groundwork for governance. Unlike kingdoms where power was inherited or seized through conquest, the Candy Kingdom's political structure was carefully engineered. Bubblegum established herself as monarch, not through bloodline, but through the logic of creation. She was both ruler and mother, both sovereign and scientist. Her authority was rarely questioned by her people, who viewed her not as a distant aristocrat, but as their literal origin. This early acceptance allowed her to centralize power and decision-making, creating a political culture where loyalty to the princess was indistinguishable from loyalty to the kingdom. Yet this structure also carried seeds of future conflict. Because Bubblegum created her people, she sometimes treated them less as autonomous individuals and more as extensions of her will. This paternalistic approach became embedded in the kingdom's foundations. The Candy people looked to Bubblegum for guidance in every matter, from defense to daily life. In return, she shouldered the weight of their survival. While this arrangement kept the kingdom stable, it also fostered a dependency that would later make her authoritarian tendencies both inevitable and necessary. Culturally, the early Candy Kingdom began to define itself through celebrations, rituals, and shared joy. The Candy people's natural inclinations toward playfulness and naivety found expression in festivals, feasts, and dances. Peppermint Butler became one of the first to blend service with culture, acting not only as PB's aide, but also as a figure of ritual and ceremony. His dark undercurrents of magical knowledge were hidden beneath his loyalty, but even this foreshadowed the complexity of Candy society. beneath the frosting lay darker layers of power and secrecy. In this era, the Candy Kingdom also established its relationship with outsiders. To some, the Candy people appeared laughably weak, their sugary forms inviting exploitation. Yet Bubblegum's cleverness ensured that the kingdom survived. She maintained alliances where necessary and erected barriers where trust was impossible. In these early years, she cultivated an image of the Candy Kingdom as harmless and cheerful, while quietly ensuring it possessed the means to resist conquest. This strategy of appearing soft while hiding strength would remain central to Candy diplomacy for centuries. Daily life in the early kingdom reflected the contradictions of Candy existence. Citizens were fragile, prone to accidents, and often lacked deep awareness of the dangers of Wu. Yet within their walls, they lived lives of remarkable cheer. They baked, they played, they told stories, and they adored their princess. Their childlike outlook was not a weakness, but a form of resilience. In a world filled with monsters, curses, and wars, the Candy people chose to live sweetly, embodying the Candy element's drive toward comfort and unity. The kingdom's foundations were not only material, but emotional. It was a place where joy was institutionalized. Still, cracks appeared even in these early years. Not every creation of Bubblegum fit neatly into her vision. Cinnamon Bun, for example, proved unstable, neither fully competent nor fully controllable. His existence highlighted the limits of Bubblegum's experiments. Similarly, Peppermint Butler's fascination with the dark arts suggested that Candy innocence could conceal dangerous knowledge. These figures represented the unpredictability of Candy life. No matter how much Bubblegum engineered stability, individuality, and imperfection slipped through. The Candy Kingdom's foundations also involved the careful cultivation of memory. Bubblegum presented her people's history as beginning with her rule, erasing the chaotic origins of the Mother Gum and downplaying the conflicts that arose with her relatives, Gumbald, Lolly, and Chickle. By shaping the story of the Candy people, she ensured that her authority was unquestioned. The past became what she declared it to be, and in doing so, she crafted not only citizens but subjects of narrative. This manipulation of memory would later become a recurring theme in her reign. One cannot overlook the role of science in these early foundations. Bubblegum's laboratory was as important as her throne room. Her inventions ranged from defensive mechanisms to medical advances, ensuring her citizens could survive injuries and illnesses that their fragile bodies might otherwise not endure. These advancements created a society where death and decay were far less threatening than they might have been. The Candy people could be mended, remade, or even reconstituted, further blurring the line between natural life and artificial creation. What emerges from this period is a kingdom unlike any other in Wu. It is not forged by conquest, nor inherited from ancient ancestors, but engineered from the ground up. Every wall, every citizen, every law carries the imprint of Bubblegum's hand. The Candy Kingdom's foundations are inseparable from her identity, and its survival depends on her continued presence. In this way, the Candy people are both liberated from the chaos of the outside world and bound by the control of their ruler. As these foundations solidify, the Candy Kingdom grows into more than a collection of citizens. It becomes a symbol. To outsiders, it represents innocence and joy, a place of refuge amid the chaos of Wu. To its citizens, it represents safety and belonging, a home crafted with intention. And to Bubblegum herself, it represents the embodiment of her vision, a society that proves sweetness can endure in a world shaped by war and destruction. Yet even in this early stability, one can see foreshadowing of the challenges to come. Dependence on a single ruler, the fragility of its citizens, and the tension between joy and control, these issues are baked into the very fabric of the Candy Kingdom. They are not accidents but inevitabilities, seeded in its foundations. The kingdom's sweetness is real, but it is also fragile, and its survival will always demand vigilance. Thus, the early Candy Kingdom is best understood as both triumph and compromise. It is triumph in that it takes the chaotic essence of candy and forges it into civilization. It is compromise in that it achieves stability only through centralization, dependence, and constant engineering. From its first walls to its first festivals, from the Banana Guards to the Gumball Guardians, the Candy Kingdom is a paradox. Fragile, yet enduring, whimsical, yet disciplined, joyful, yet dependent on authority. Its foundations reflect the paradox of candy itself. If the Candy Kingdom's foundations are its walls, towers, and institutions, then its soul lies in the candy people themselves. These citizens, brought into existence through Princess Bubblegum's genius and the lingering power of the candy element, embody the paradox of sweetness and fragility. They are at once endearing and expendable, innocent and unsettling, humorous and heartbreaking. To truly understand the history of the candy people, we must pause to examine what they are, their biology, their psychology, and the cultural role they play within OO. From the moment they appear on screen, the candy people are defined by their vulnerability. They are literally made of food: gum, chocolate, candy corn, marshmallow, peppermint, and more. Their bodies are colourful and whimsical, yet soft, unstable, and easily damaged. In the harsh world of OO, filled with demons, vampires, liches, and magical catastrophes, they stand out as uniquely breakable. A stray attack that might inconvenience a tougher species could dissolve, shatter, or melt a candy person. This fragility is not a minor detail. It is the defining condition of their existence. Princess Bubblegum's scientific engineering mitigates some of this weakness. She designs her citizens with enough internal structure to walk, talk, and function as a society. Yet no amount of gum scaffolding can make them invincible. Unlike fire people who burn with passion, or slime people who regenerate endlessly, candy people remain inherently perishable. They bruise, crack, and crumble. Even when repaired, they carry the mark of their delicacy. Their biology is both miracle and limitation, a testament to Bubblegum's ingenuity, but also a reminder of their dependence on her maintenance. Their psychological traits are equally distinctive. Most candy people are characterized by childlike simplicity, naivety, and cheer. They greet crises with wide-eyed enthusiasm, often failing to comprehend the full scope of danger around them. To an outside observer, this can appear comical, even absurd. Yet their innocence serves a deeper function. In a world shaped by the trauma of the Mushroom War and the constant threat of annihilation, the candy people embody resilience through simplicity. Their lack of awareness shields them from despair. They do not need to understand every looming apocalypse. It is enough that they can sing, laugh, and adore their princess. This childlike psychology also makes them deeply loyal. Their devotion to Princess Bubblegum is not born of political calculation, but of genuine affection and trust. To them, she is not only ruler, but protector, mother, and creator. This loyalty ensures social stability, but also raises ethical questions. Do they truly choose their devotion, or is it baked into their very nature? If they are engineered to love and trust their princess, is their loyalty free will or programming? Adventure Time rarely answers this outright, but the ambiguity adds depth to their portrayal. The candy people are not puppets, yet neither are they fully autonomous in the way other species of Oo are. The combination of fragility and innocence often casts the candy people as comic relief. Episodes featuring citizens like Starchy, Mr. Cupcake, or the Banana Guards highlight their quirks, misunderstandings, and bumbling attempts at responsibility. But beneath the humour lies a more sombre truth. Their simplicity makes them expendable in the eyes of their creator. Princess Bubblegum occasionally risks or sacrifices individual candy people for the sake of the kingdom as a whole. This utilitarian calculus underscores the darker side of candy society. Sweetness is maintained not only by joy, but by a willingness to treat lives as replaceable. This expendability ties back to their biology. Because bubblegum can recreate candy people, the permanence of death is diminished. A lost citizen can be replaced with another batch of sugar and science. This raises questions about individuality. Is each candy person unique, or are they interchangeable units of candy life? Characters like Peppermint Butler, who clearly possess distinct personalities, suggest the former. But the nameless crowds of candy citizens, who blend together in their simplicity, suggest the latter. The tension between individuality and interchangeability defines much of their identity. Among the candy people, a few stand out as exceptions: Cinnamon Bun, Peppermint Butler, and Mr. Cupcake among them. Cinnamon Bun, often portrayed as dim-witted and clumsy, eventually undergoes transformation when infused with fire magic, gaining maturity and independence. His arc demonstrates that candy people are not limited to their initial programming. They can evolve beyond Bubblegum's intentions. Peppermint Butler, meanwhile, embodies the opposite extreme. Though he appears loyal and sweet, he conceals a vast knowledge of the dark arts, delving into necromancy and demonology. His duplicity reveals that candy people can harbour secrets and complexities far beyond their cheerful surfaces. These characters remind us that candy innocence is not absolute, but a spectrum. Symbolically, the candy people reflect the themes of Adventure Time itself. They represent fragility in a dangerous world, the desire for joy despite chaos, and the tension between dependence and autonomy. Their very bodies, made of sugar and sweets, embody impermanence. Just as candy in the real world melts, breaks, or gets consumed, the candy people live with the constant shadow of their own perishability. Yet, they also symbolize endurance. Despite countless attacks, invasions, and apocalyptic crises, the candy people survive, rebuild, and continue to live joyfully. Their fragility does not prevent resilience, it demands it. The candy people also serve as a mirror for Princess Bubblegum. Their sweetness reflects her nurturing side, but their simplicity highlights her need for control. Their loyalty gives her power, but their fragility burdens her with responsibility. In many ways, they are extensions of her personality, externalizing both her strengths and her flaws. Their innocence contrasts with her calculating mind, yet their existence depends on her. By studying the candy people, we study Bubblegum herself, and by questioning their autonomy, we question hers. Their cultural life reflects these paradoxes. Candy citizens enjoy festivals, parades, and communal celebrations, often erupting into song and dance. These cultural expressions reinforce their unity, turning fragility into shared joy. But even here, their dependence on PB is evident. Festivals honour her rule, parades celebrate her protection, and even their casual conversations often circle back to their princess. Their culture is not entirely independent, but shaped by the framework she provides. They are free to play, but only within the boundaries she has set. One of the most poignant aspects of their nature is their role in the larger narrative of Adventure Time. The Candy People often appear as comic background characters, yet their presence underscores the stakes of every major conflict. When the Lich threatens annihilation, when the Vampire Court returns, when Gumbald stages his uprising, it is the Candy People whose lives hang in the balance. They may not wield great power, but their vulnerability gives weight to the battles around them. Protecting the Candy People is often the unspoken goal of every struggle in Ooh. They are the fragile heart of the world, the reason heroes fight and rulers endure. Perhaps the clearest expression of their nature comes during the elemental crisis. When Patient Street Pym awakens the dormant elements and Ooh is reshaped, the candy element overwhelms everything. Citizens of all kinds are assimilated into candy forms, smiling endlessly, free of conflict, but also free of individuality. This vision of candy perfection is terrifying precisely because it reveals the candy element's true nature, a desire for sweetness so complete that it erases difference. The Candy People, in their normal state, balance on the edge of this fate. They are sweet and unified, but not yet homogenized. Their daily lives are a constant negotiation between individuality and conformity. In the end, the nature of the Candy People is best understood as paradoxical. They are fragile, yet enduring, simple, yet capable of surprising depth, expendable, yet central to the story of Ooh. Their innocence is both genuine and manufactured, their loyalty both heartfelt and engineered. They are comic relief and moral anchor, symbol and society. To dismiss them as background characters is to miss their thematic importance. They remind us that, in a world of monsters and magic, what truly matters is not only strength but sweetness, the ability to live joyfully despite fragility. The Candy People are not merely citizens of a whimsical kingdom. They are living symbols of Adventure Time's central themes. They embody the tension between creation and control, fragility and resilience, individuality and conformity. Their very existence challenges viewers to see sweetness not as trivial, but as profound. In a world fractured by war and magic, the Candy People endure as a reminder that joy, however fragile, is worth protecting. No civilization in Ooh survives without conflict, and the Candy Kingdom is no exception. From the very moment Princess Bubblegum brought her people into being, she knew that their sweetness would make them a target. Fragile, naive, and edible, the Candy People were ill-suited to defend themselves in a land where monsters roamed, kingdoms competed for power, and ancient magic lingered. The history of their early conflicts reveals not only the vulnerability of the Candy People, but also the resilience of their kingdom, and the lengths Bubblegum was willing to go to ensure its survival. The first threats the Candy Kingdom faced were not organized armies or ambitious warlords, but the wilderness of Ooh itself. In the centuries following the Mushroom War, the land was scattered with mutated beasts, elemental hazards, and magical anomalies. For most creatures, survival meant adaptation or predation. For the Candy People, survival meant protection. The Banana Guards, though bumbling, served as the first line of defense against wandering monsters. Yet the Banana Guards' ineptitude quickly made it clear that brute force was not the kingdom's strength. Instead, Bubblegum relied on ingenuity. Her traps, barriers, and clever engineering compensated for her guards' weaknesses, proving that Candy civilization could endure not through power, but through brains. But beyond random monsters, the Candy Kingdom also faced external pressures from neighbouring powers. The Fire Kingdom, driven by passion and destruction, saw in the Candy people an easy conquest. Fire and candy are natural enemies. One melts, the other burns. Bubblegum, recognizing this danger, pursued a strategy of deterrence rather than aggression. She fortified her walls, expanded the banana guard ranks, and cultivated alliances with individuals who could dissuade Fire Kingdom aggression. The balance was delicate. The Fire Kingdom's armies could have overwhelmed candy defences, but Bubblegum's reputation for cunning made them wary. Similarly, the Ice Kingdom posed its own challenges. Ice King himself, erratic and unpredictable, often targeted the Candy Kingdom not for conquest, but for companionship. His obsession with princesses made Bubblegum a recurring victim of his schemes. These kidnappings and invasions were not grand wars, but they forced the Candy people into constant states of alert. For the citizens, Ice King was both terrifying and absurd. A figure who could freeze them solid, yet whose bumbling made him more nuisance than destroyer. For Bubblegum, however, these incidents reinforced the need for vigilance. No matter how whimsical the threat appeared, the survival of her people demanded preparation. It was not only elemental kingdoms that threatened the Candy people. The land of Oo was filled with opportunists, raiders, thieves, and wandering adventurers who saw the Candy citizens as easy prey. Their bodies, after all, were edible. To hungry wanderers, candy flesh looked less like life and more like food. Stories spread of individuals who consumed candy people, treating them as delicacies rather than beings. These darker tales remind us that candy fragility was not only a physical weakness, but a temptation for others. To protect her people, Bubblegum was forced to assert their personhood, establishing diplomatic boundaries that discouraged exploitation. Perhaps the most important early conflict, however, was internal. Bubblegum's own relatives, Gumbald, Lolly, and Chickle, turned against her, envisioning a different future for the Candy Kingdom. Gumbald, in particular, sought to elevate the Candy people beyond their fragility, reshaping them into more durable and ambitious forms. His rebellion revealed the fundamental tension at the heart of Candy society. Should they remain innocent and childlike under Bubblegum's care, or should they evolve into something stronger, even if it meant sacrificing their sweetness? This uprising, though ultimately suppressed by Bubblegum's gum serum, left scars that would resurface centuries later during Gumbald's return. In many ways, the Gumbald conflict was the first civil war of the Candy people, a reminder that their greatest threats were not always external. Another formative crisis came from magical corruption. Oo is a land saturated with spells, curses, and enchantments, and the Candy Kingdom was not immune. Peppermint Butler's fascination with the dark arts, while often hidden, reflected the kingdom's vulnerability to forces beyond science. At times, magical contamination spread among the Candy people, transforming them into unstable or monstrous forms. These incidents revealed that candy biology, while resilient in its own way, was deeply susceptible to magical alteration. Bubblegum often stepped in personally to contain such outbreaks, reinforcing her dual role as ruler and protector scientist. Through these conflicts, a pattern emerged. The Candy Kingdom rarely prevailed through martial strength. Its defences, from banana guards to frosting walls, were insufficient against the raw power of neighbouring kingdoms. Instead, its survival depended on Bubblegum's foresight, diplomacy, and scientific ingenuity. She manipulated alliances, leveraged her intellect, and used the naivety of her people as a shield. To outside forces, the Candy Kingdom appeared harmless, almost laughably fragile. Yet beneath its frosting exterior lay a core of calculation. This dual image, harmless on the surface, cunning beneath, became one of the Candy Kingdom's greatest weapons. The Candy people themselves responded to these threats with a mixture of fear and denial. Their innocence often prevented them from fully grasping the dangers they faced. When monsters attacked or Ice King struck again, they panicked, screamed, and relied on their princess to restore order. Yet, as soon as the danger passed, they returned to their festivals, jokes, and simple joys. This resilience was not born of strength, but of forgetfulness. Their ability to move on, to live sweetly despite repeated crises, ensured that the kingdom retained its cultural identity. Fragility was not the end of them, it was their constant condition. One of the most fascinating aspects of these early conflicts is how they shaped the Candy Kingdom's mythology. Each threat, whether Ice King's kidnappings, Fire Kingdom's skirmishes, or Gumbold's rebellion, became part of the collective memory of Candy society. Yet these memories were filtered through Bubblegum's control. She downplayed failures, emphasized resilience, and crafted narratives that reinforced loyalty to her leadership. The Candy people, eager for reassurance, accepted these stories as truth. Thus, conflict not only tested the kingdom, but also deepened its dependence on Bubblegum's authority. Over time, the Candy Kingdom's reputation grew. Despite its fragility, it became known as one of Oo's most stable societies. Its walls stood, its festivals continued, and its princess remained in power. Other kingdoms might wage wars, collapse, or fall into anarchy, but the Candy Kingdom endured. This endurance was not accidental. It was forged in the fires of conflict, hardened by the constant need to defend what appeared indefensible. Every monster attack repelled, every kidnapping foiled, and every rebellion suppressed, reinforced the idea that sweetness could survive in a hostile world. Yet these early threats also revealed the darker side of Candy society. Survival came at a cost. Bubblegum's authoritarian tendencies, her manipulation of memory, and her willingness to sacrifice individuals for the greater good all emerged from these conflicts. To keep her people safe, she centralized power, expanded surveillance, and engineered obedience. The Candy people accepted this without question, trusting their princess completely. But beneath their loyalty lay a troubling truth. Their freedom was secondary to their safety. This compromise, seeded in the kingdom's earliest conflicts, would define its history. In the end, the early conflicts of the Candy Kingdom reveal a civilization that should not have survived, but did. Surrounded by stronger kingdoms, vulnerable to predators, and fractured by internal rebellion, the Candy people endured through a mixture of innocence, resilience, and the unyielding will of their princess. Their survival was not inevitable. It was earned through vigilance, sacrifice, and the paradoxical strength of fragility. For every monster that threatened to devour them, every fire that threatened to consume them, and every betrayal that threatened to fracture them, the Candy people emerged, shaken but still sweet. For all its walls, guards, and defences, the Candy Kingdom has never been able to survive in isolation. The world of Oo is a patchwork of kingdoms, each defined by its own elemental nature, cultural quirks, and rulers with ambitions that often clash. From the fiery intensity of the Fire Kingdom to the cold eccentricity of the Ice Kingdom, from the chaotic Slime Kingdom to the small but unpredictable grasslands, the Candy people's history is as much about diplomacy and rivalry as it is about their own inner development. To understand the Candy people's place in Oo, one must examine how they navigated these relationships, sometimes with charm, sometimes with cunning, and always under the guiding hand of Princess Bubblegum. The Fire Kingdom stands as perhaps the Candy Kingdom's most obvious elemental opposite. Fire consumes, burns, and destroys, while candy melts, crumbles, and softens. To the Fire Kingdom, especially under rulers like Flame King, the Candy People represented both weakness and temptation. They were fragile, edible, and easy to exploit. Bubblegum understood this elemental opposition better than anyone, and so she pursued a strategy of deterrence. She knew that candy armies could not match the fire soldiers in direct combat, so she turned to diplomacy and science. Through clever treaties and technological safeguards, she ensured that the Fire Kingdom saw her not as prey, but as a dangerous opponent cloaked in sugar. The relationship between the kingdoms shifted dramatically with the rise of Flame Princess. No longer just a pawn of her father's ambitions, Flame Princess brought a new dimension to Candy-Fire relations. At first, her fiery nature seemed destined to clash with Bubblegum's calculated rationality. Yet, over time, the two rulers forged a wary respect. Flame Princess's independence from her father aligned with Bubblegum's own desire to protect Ooh from unchecked destruction. Their interactions demonstrated that the Candy Kingdom could coexist with even its most dangerous elemental opposite, provided mutual respect and caution were maintained. For the Candy People themselves, these relations were distant but impactful. Each treaty, each shift in leadership in the Fire Kingdom meant either safety or renewed fear. The Ice Kingdom presented a very different kind of relationship. While the Fire Kingdom was a looming external threat, the Ice Kingdom was a persistent nuisance. Ice King's obsession with princesses, and with Bubblegum in particular, led to repeated kidnappings and invasions. To the Candy People, these attacks were terrifying reminders of their vulnerability, yet Ice King's incompetence often turned them into absurd spectacles. The banana guards would stumble in panic, the citizens would scream, and inevitably Finn and Jake, or Bubblegum herself, would resolve the crisis. These encounters fostered an uneasy relationship. Ice King was both enemy and neighbour, dangerous yet pitiable. In time, as his tragic backstory as Simon Petrikov came to light, even Bubblegum began to treat him less as a villain and more as a broken figure. For the Candy People, however, he remained the bogeyman of their childhood tales, the icy madman who might swoop in and steal their beloved princess at any moment. Beyond these elemental rivals, the Slime Kingdom also influenced the Candy People's history. Slime, with its amorphous and consuming nature, represents a different danger to candy: absorption. During the elemental crisis, when Patient Street Pim unleashed elemental rebalancing, slime and candy clashed as dominant forces. The Candy Kingdom was nearly overrun by the suffocating embrace of slime, which threatened to dissolve candy individuality into formless goo. This conflict highlighted how candy's desire for cohesion and slime's drive for consumption are uneasy neighbours in the elemental hierarchy. Even outside of this crisis, the Slime Kingdom remained a reminder to the Candy People that not all enemies are obvious. Some wish to burn you, others to devour you. Both are equally dangerous. The Candy Kingdom also maintained relations with smaller polities and independent rulers scattered across Ooh. Princess Bubblegum's diplomacy extended to places like the Wildberry Kingdom, the Breakfast Kingdom, and the Lumpy Space Dimension. These relationships were less about elemental opposition and more about political maneuvering. Bubblegum's scientific mind and natural charisma allowed her to establish herself as a central figure in Ooh's network of rulers. For the Candy People, this meant that their princess was often absent or occupied with matters beyond their borders. Yet her ability to maintain peace with neighbouring societies ensured that candy life continued undisturbed. A particularly complex relationship developed between the Candy Kingdom and Marceline, the Vampire Queen. Though not a ruler of a kingdom in the traditional sense, Marceline's power and history made her one of Oo's most influential figures. Her bond with Princess Bubblegum, at first strained and later romantic, had significant implications for the Candy People. Marceline represented both a protector and a challenge. Her vampiric nature made her dangerous, yet her loyalty to Bubblegum placed her firmly on the side of the Candy Kingdom in times of crisis. For the Candy People, who rarely understood the nuances of their princess's personal life, Marceline was an enigmatic ally, someone who could destroy them but chose instead to defend them. Diplomacy with other kingdoms was not always peaceful. The rivalry with Gumbald's faction, for instance, was as much about political control as it was about elemental destiny. When Gumbald returned to challenge Bubblegum's rule, the Candy People were thrust into a conflict that blurred the line between family feud and civil war. Gumbald's vision of Candy society, ambitious, hierarchical, and expansionist, stood in direct opposition to Bubblegum's more protective, centralized model. For the Candy People, the choice was simple. Their loyalty to Bubblegum outweighed any alternative. Yet the conflict revealed how fragile their diplomacy could be when Candy itself was divided. What makes the Candy Kingdom's relationships remarkable is not that they avoided war entirely, for they certainly faced their share of battles, but that they consistently survived despite their vulnerability. Where other kingdoms relied on raw power, the Candy Kingdom relied on strategy, intelligence, and the paradoxical strength of appearing harmless. To outsiders, Candy citizens seemed like the least threatening population in Oo. Yet behind their naivety was Bubblegum's calculating mind, ensuring that her people were never without allies, never entirely exposed to conquest. For the Candy People themselves, these relationships were both distant and immediate. They did not sit at treaty tables or strategize with rulers. They lived their lives in markets, bakeries, and festivals, blissfully unaware of the political chess that kept them safe. Yet the results of diplomacy touched them directly. When Bubblegum secured peace, they enjoyed uninterrupted sweetness. When diplomacy failed, they screamed in panic as flames, ice, or slime breached their walls. Their survival depended on a game they did not play, but always benefited from. The Candy Kingdom's role in Oo's broader political landscape cannot be overstated. It became a hub of stability in a fractured world, a place where rulers gathered, adventurers sought aid, and wars were decided. The Candy People, despite their fragility, became central to Oo's identity. Protecting them was not only Bubblegum's mission, but also a recurring motivation for heroes like Finn and Jake. Their survival symbolized the survival of joy itself in a land too often defined by conflict. In the end, the Candy Kingdom's relations with other kingdoms reveal both the strengths and vulnerabilities of Candy society. They were weak in arms, but strong in alliances. They were naive in perception, but shrewd in leadership. They survived not by crushing their enemies, but by outlasting them, by weaving themselves so deeply into the fabric of Oo that to destroy them would mean unravelling the world itself. The Candy People endured because their princess understood that sweetness alone could not save them, but sweetness combined with strategy could. For all the wars, uprisings, and crises that shape the Candy Kingdom's history, the heart of Candy society is not found in battlefields or throne rooms. It is found in kitchens, markets, workshops, and the streets where ordinary Candy People live out their days. The Candy Kingdom is a society that thrives on routine, celebration, and community, and the daily lives of its citizens reveal as much about their identity as their role in the larger struggles of U. To understand the Kandi people fully, one must step away from diplomacy and conflict and instead walk among them to see how they work, play, and find sweetness in the shadow of fragility. The first and most striking feature of Kandi daily life is its communal nature. The Kandi people, by design and by temperament, are highly social. They are rarely seen alone, preferring to gather in groups for festivals, meals, or even casual gossip. Their personalities are shaped by a desire for connection, reflecting the Kandi element's essence of cohesion. This communal instinct makes their society vibrant and joyful, but it also reveals their dependence on one another. Few Kandi people function well in isolation. They thrive when surrounded by others, reinforcing their identity as part of a collective whole. Work in the Kandi kingdom is as whimsical as its citizens. Jobs are often tied directly to the individual's physical form or personality. Starchy, for instance, is the gravedigger, a role that humorously contrasts with his potato-based body, but also highlights the kingdom's pragmatic need to handle death. Mr. Cupcake works as a bodybuilder, his frosted form lending itself to physical comedy and exaggerated displays of strength. Peppermint Butler serves not only as Bubblegum's aide, but also as a diplomat, magician, and secret keeper. These roles illustrate how Kandi people's identities blur the line between who they are and what they do. Their very existence often dictates their place in society. Markets and bakeries are central to daily life, where Kandi people gather not only to trade goods, but to socialize. Their food culture is curious. Though they are made of edible substances, they also consume food. The humor of a gingerbread man eating a cookie or a marshmallow drinking hot chocolate reflects the playful absurdity of their world. Yet it also reinforces the Kandi kingdom's resilience. Even in a land where their bodies might be mistaken for snacks by outsiders, Kandi people embrace food as celebration rather than fear. Meals are not about survival, but about joy, reinforcing their innocence in a dangerous world. Festivals and parades mark the rhythm of Kandi life. The kingdom often erupts into song and dance, celebrating events both significant and trivial. Birthdays, seasonal changes, or even minor victories are excuses for communal joy. These festivals often feature elaborate decorations, gumdrop lanterns, frosting banners, Kandi confetti, that turn the entire kingdom into a stage of sweetness. To the Kandi people, celebration is not an interruption of daily life, but its essence. Joy is institutionalized, woven into their very culture as a way of resisting the despair that might otherwise overwhelm such a fragile people. At the same time, daily life is marked by naivety. Kandi people are often shown panicking at the slightest disruption, their childlike minds unable to process danger in measured ways. A monster sighting or an invasion by Ice King sends them running and screaming, often more comical than effective. Yet their ability to return to normalcy just as quickly demonstrates a resilience hidden beneath their fear. They forget danger almost as soon as it passes, returning to baking, gossiping, or singing. This cycle of panic and joy defines their psychological rhythm. Individually, several Kandi people stand out as representatives of daily life in the kingdom. Starchy, with his deep voice and fixation on conspiracies, reveals a society where even comic figures wrestle with existential questions. As the gravedigger, he constantly contemplates mortality, an ironic role in a land where citizens can be remade by their princess. His conspiratorial leanings add humour, but also highlight the undercurrent of unease in Kandi society, a faint awareness that their world is stranger and darker than they are allowed to admit. Mr. Cupcake, muscular and flamboyant, represents the more eccentric side of candy life. His obsession with bodybuilding is not about practicality, but about expression. He takes joy in his physicality, even though his frosted form makes his vanity absurd. Through him, we see how candy people channel their uniqueness into activities that enrich the community, however trivial they may seem. Peppermint Butler is perhaps the most complex example. Outwardly, he is the model citizen, loyal, polite, and utterly devoted to bubblegum. But beneath his cheerful surface lies a deep knowledge of the occult. His secret dealings with dark forces reveal a tension in candy life. While most candy people embody innocence, some conceal unsettling depths. Peppermint Butler demonstrates that even in the sweetest of societies, darkness can lurk. For the candy people, his duality is invisible, but for viewers, it complicates the image of candy innocence. Cinnamon Bun illustrates another side of candy life: imperfection, clumsy, naive, and often dismissed. Cinnamon Bun is treated as comic relief. Yet his growth, from incompetence to independence after absorbing fire magic, shows that candy people are not static. They can change, mature, and even surpass their original limitations. Cinnamon Bun's journey suggests that daily life in the Candy Kingdom is not entirely predetermined by one's nature. Growth is possible, even if it is rare. Another element of candy daily life is their devotion to Princess Bubblegum. For the citizens, she is not only ruler, but caretaker. Their conversations often revolve around her, their festivals celebrate her, and their crises are resolved only when she intervenes. This dependence gives their lives structure, but also reveals their lack of political agency. They do not debate policy or challenge her authority. For the candy people, loyalty to bubblegum is as natural as breathing. This unquestioned devotion simplifies their daily existence, but also limits their independence. Religion or spirituality is not explicitly depicted among the candy people, but their behavior suggests that their princess fills the role of divine figure. They look to her for answers, safety, and even identity. Their lives are framed by her presence, making their society less a democracy and more a benevolent theocracy. This lack of separation between ruler and deity explains why their culture is so stable. Dissent is unthinkable when the object of devotion is also the creator of the people themselves. Daily life is not without darker undertones. Candy people occasionally confront accidents or deaths, whether from external threats or their own fragility. These moments are treated with humour in the show, but underscore a sobering truth. Life for candy citizens is precarious. Yet their rituals, like Starchy's role as gravedigger, suggest a culture that has normalised fragility. Death does not paralyse them. It becomes another part of their rhythm, offset by constant renewal. Their ability to absorb loss and return to joy reflects their resilience in the face of impermanence. Perhaps the most fascinating element of candy daily life is how it contrasts with the chaos of Ooh at large. While other kingdoms are defined by firestorms, ice magic, or slime jewels, the Candy Kingdom is defined by baking contests, gossip, and parties. This contrast highlights the candy people's role in the narrative. They are the heart of normalcy in an abnormal world. They embody what civilization strives for, not endless power or conquest, but safety, community, and sweetness. Their daily lives remind us that even in a land of liches and monsters, joy is possible. The candy people's innocence also serves as a foil for the darker characters of Adventure Time. Their naivety highlights the tragedy of Ice King, the menace of the Lich, and the ambition of Gumbald. Against such figures, the Candy people seem absurdly fragile, yet their very fragility makes them worth protecting. Their daily lives, simple, sweet, and repetitive, give meaning to the struggles of heroes and rulers alike. They are not warriors or conquerors, but they are the reason others fight wars and make sacrifices. In the end, daily life for the Candy people is defined by paradoxes. They are fragile but resilient, naive but capable of surprising depth, dependent but joyful. Their culture revolves around community, celebration, and devotion, making them both comic and profound. To dismiss their lives as trivial is to miss their thematic role. They embody the sweetness that makes survival meaningful. In their baking, gossip, and endless festivals, the Candy people remind us that civilization is not only about power, but about joy, the simple, fragile joy of living sweetly together. Among the many citizens of the Candy Kingdom, few stand out as much as Cinnamon Bun. At first glance, he appears to be comic relief, clumsy, dim-witted, and prone to accidents. He is often the butt of jokes, stumbling through scenes with little awareness of what is happening around him. Yet, as adventure time unfolds, Cinnamon Bun undergoes one of the most unexpected arcs of any Candy person. His journey from incompetent citizen to independent figure of surprising wisdom reflects not only his personal growth, but also the potential of the Candy people to evolve beyond their initial limitations. In his story, the fragility of Candy life is transformed into resilience, and a character once dismissed as useless becomes a symbol of growth. From his earliest appearances, Cinnamon Bun is defined by immaturity. He speaks in a slurred, uncertain voice, often misunderstanding simple instructions. His childlike demeanour makes him endearing, but also exasperating to those around him. Princess Bubblegum frequently scolds him. Finn and Jake treat him as harmless background noise, and the other Candy people rarely take him seriously. He is portrayed as half-baked, literally and metaphorically. Unlike his fellow citizens, who at least function within their simple roles, Cinnamon Bun seems perpetually unfinished. This portrayal aligns with the Candy people's general fragility, but exaggerates it to the point of parody. Yet beneath the comedy lies a subtle truth about Candy existence. Cinnamon Bun's half-baked nature is not just a personality quirk, it symbolises the limitations of Bubblegum's creations. Not every citizen is perfectly stable or complete. The Candy Kingdom may present itself as orderly, but its citizens vary in quality and reliability. Cinnamon Bun embodies this imperfection. His flaws remind us that the Candy people are engineered beings, prone to defects and instability. His existence complicates the idea of Candy innocence, showing that fragility can manifest not only in bodies, but in minds. Despite his flaws, Cinnamon Bun demonstrates loyalty and kindness. He is never malicious, even when his mistakes cause problems. His eagerness to help, however misguided, reflects the Candy people's instinct for community. When asked to participate in tasks, whether guarding the kingdom, assisting in festivals, or accompanying Finn and Jake, he agrees without hesitation. This loyalty makes him a sympathetic character, even as his incompetence frustrates others. He may not be strong or clever, but he is dependable in spirit. Cinnamon Bun's turning point comes with his involvement in the Fire Kingdom. When Flame Princess rises to power after overthrowing her father, Cinnamon Bun finds himself caught in the kingdom's political struggles. In a surprising twist, he absorbs some of the fire element's energy, a moment that literally changes him. The infusion of fire burns away his half-baked immaturity, transforming him into a fully baked, more complete version of himself. His body becomes darker, sturdier, and his mind sharper. The once bumbling citizen begins to display confidence and insight. This transformation is one of the most profound examples of growth in Adventure Time. A character once written off as hopelessly incompetent evolves into someone capable of independence and leadership. He even serves as Flame Princess's trusted ally and companion, offering her wisdom and loyalty. Cinnamon Bun's maturity is not framed as a joke, but as a genuine development, signalling that even the most underestimated candy people possess the potential for change. Thematically, Cinnamon Bun's journey resonates with Adventure Time's broader exploration of growth and transformation. Just as Finn matures from boy to young man, and Ice King evolves from villain to tragic figure, Cinnamon Bun grows from half-baked to whole. His arc challenges the assumption that candy people are static creations, bound forever to their designed simplicity. Instead, Cinnamon Bun proves that even candy citizens can evolve beyond their origins, breaking free from the limitations of their biology and their princess's control. This transformation also reflects the candy element's dual nature. Candy seeks cohesion and sweetness, but when combined with fire, the element of change and passion, it becomes something more dynamic. Cinnamon Bun's fire-infused maturity demonstrates how elements can blend to create new possibilities. He becomes a living symbol of reconciliation between candy and fire, embodying unity rather than opposition. His bond with Flame Princess further cements this symbolism. Together, they represent the potential for cooperation between kingdoms that once viewed each other as elemental enemies. Cinnamon Bun's independence is especially significant when contrasted with the candy people's usual dependency on bubblegum. Unlike his fellow citizens, who look to their princess for direction, Cinnamon Bun steps beyond her shadow. His maturity allows him to act on his own, even challenging the assumption that PB's control is absolute. In this sense, Cinnamon Bun's arc foreshadows the candy people's potential to exist beyond their creator's authority. He is proof that autonomy is possible, even within a society engineered for obedience. His role in the Fire Kingdom also reveals his newfound wisdom. He becomes one of Flame Princess's most trusted advisors, offering her not only loyalty, but also perspective. While still gentle and simple, his advice carries weight. He tells her to trust herself, to lead with confidence, and to embrace her independence from her father. These words, coming from a character once dismissed as a fool, underscore his growth. Cinnamon Bun's wisdom is not the product of academic knowledge, but of lived experience. His journey from incompetence to maturity grants him insights that others overlook. For viewers, Cinnamon Bun's evolution is deeply satisfying. He begins as a background gag, a character whose clumsiness invites laughter, but he ends as a symbol of growth and redemption. His transformation subverts expectations, reminding us that no character in Adventure Time is static. Even the most comic figures can carry profound meaning. Cinnamon Bun teaches us that growth is always possible, that fragility can give way to resilience, and that being half-baked is not the end of the story. Within the Candy Kingdom, his journey holds symbolic weight. For citizens who remain naive and dependent, Cinnamon Bun's independence represents an alternative path. Though they may never articulate it, his example shows that candy people are not doomed to remain forever fragile or simplistic. Change is possible, even for them. This possibility does not diminish their innocence but enriches it, showing that fragility need not mean stagnation. Cinnamon Bun's story also deepens the candy people's thematic role in Adventure Time. If the candy people symbolize sweetness, innocence, and fragility, then Cinnamon Bun represents the potential for that sweetness to mature. He proves that candy innocence can evolve into wisdom without losing its core kindness. His loyalty remains, his joy remains, but they are tempered by confidence and independence. In this sense, Cinnamon Bun embodies the best of candy identity: resilience without bitterness, maturity without cynicism. Even after his transformation, Cinnamon Bun retains elements of his old self. He is still gentle, still a little awkward, and still deeply loyal. His growth does not erase his identity, but builds upon it. This continuity makes his arc believable and emotionally resonant. He is not reborn as an entirely new character, but matures into a fuller version of himself. His journey mirrors real growth, slow, surprising, and rooted in the same core traits that defined him from the start. In the end, Cinnamon Bun's journey is one of the most remarkable character arcs in the Candy Kingdom's history. From half-baked comic relief to trusted advisor, he demonstrates the capacity for change within a society defined by fragility. His transformation challenges assumptions about candy innocence, expands the possibilities of elemental unity, and provides a rare example of a candy person stepping beyond bubblegum's control. For a character so often overlooked, his story becomes one of the clearest illustrations of Adventure Time's central message. Growth is always possible, no matter how unlikely it seems. From the outside, the Candy Kingdom appears to be the most cheerful and harmless society in all of Oo. Its citizens sing, dance, and celebrate with unwavering joy. Its streets are bright and colourful, and its ruler is beloved almost to the point of worship. Yet beneath this surface of sweetness lies something far more complicated. The Candy Kingdom is not simply a land of innocence, but a society maintained through control, manipulation, and difficult compromises. Princess Bubblegum's scientific genius and authoritarian instincts have created a civilization that thrives, but only because its darker aspects are hidden beneath layers of frosting. To fully understand the Candy people, one must confront this shadowed side of their history. The first and most fundamental darkness is the nature of their creation. The Candy people are not born naturally. They are engineered by Princess Bubblegum, shaped from sugar, gum, and magic into sentient beings. This fact alone raises unsettling questions about autonomy and free will. If the Candy people are designed by their ruler, then how much of their loyalty, innocence, and simplicity is genuine? Are they truly individuals with agency, or are they programmed extensions of Bubblegum's will? The show never provides a definitive answer, but the ambiguity itself is telling. Candy society thrives on joy, but that joy may be less a choice than a condition of their creation. Bubblegum's role as both ruler and creator blurs moral boundaries. She is not merely a monarch responsible for her subjects, but their architect. This dual role gives her extraordinary power, but also extraordinary responsibility. When Candy people falter, it is often because of her design flaws. When they panic, it is because she built them to be fragile. And when they thrive, it is because she engineered their capacity for joy. This creates a society where the line between protection and control is razor thin. Bubblegum loves her people, but her love is inseparable from her authority over them. One of the clearest examples of this darker side is her response to Gumball's rebellion. When her uncle and relatives, created from the same mother gum, challenged her rule, Bubblegum turned to science, not to negotiate, but to neutralize. She developed Dum Dum Juice, a formula that reverted them into simple-minded candy citizens incapable of dissent. This act, while ensuring her immediate control, also revealed the authoritarian underpinnings of her kingdom. Rather than risk the instability of rebellion, she erased her opponent's autonomy. The cheerful faces of the Candy people are thus built upon the silenced dissent of those who opposed her. The use of the Dum Dum Juice reflects a broader theme. The Candy Kingdom values stability over freedom. For Bubblegum, and by extension for her people, the greatest danger is chaos. To prevent it, she is willing to manipulate, experiment, and even strip individuals of their agency. The result is a society that appears idyllic, but is maintained through constant surveillance and control. The banana guards, though bumbling, patrol the streets relentlessly. The gumball guardians loom as silent enforcers of order. And Bubblegum herself monitors her citizens' lives with scientific precision. Freedom in this kingdom is always secondary to safety. This darker side extends into her scientific experiments. Bubblegum frequently tests new creations, sometimes with disregard for the ethical implications. Clones of herself, genetically modified creatures, and even dangerous experiments like Lemongrab reflect her willingness to push boundaries. The Earl of Lemongrab, in particular, embodies the unintended consequences of her science. Created to rule as her regent, Lemongrab quickly spiraled into instability, tyranny, and madness. His existence highlights the risks of Bubblegum's control. When she designs life, she cannot always predict or manage the results. The suffering he inflicts on his own lemon citizens is a mirror of what could happen if Bubblegum's own kingdom ever spiraled beyond her control. Even the candy people's fragility, often played for humour, has a darker undertone. Their bodies are so delicate that they can be injured or destroyed with ease, and yet they are expected to live normal lives in a dangerous world. While Bubblegum does her best to protect them, their vulnerability makes them perpetually dependent on her. Their innocence is thus both a joy and a trap. They cannot survive without her vigilance, and she cannot step back without risking their annihilation. This mutual dependency locks them in a cycle where the candy people never truly grow beyond her control. Peppermint Butler's secret life underscores another aspect of Candy Society's darkness. Outwardly, he is the model of loyalty, a cheerful servant to the princess. In secret, however, he dabbles in necromancy, demonology, and forbidden magic. His knowledge of the dark arts suggests that even within the kingdom's innocence, shadows lurk. Peppermint Butler demonstrates that candy people are not immune to corruption. Their innocence can conceal dangerous depths, and their loyalty can mask ulterior motives. In his case, his darkness remains aligned with Bubblegum's interests, but it reveals how fragile the veneer of sweetness truly island. The candy people's devotion to Bubblegum also raises troubling implications. Their loyalty is so absolute that dissent is almost non-existent. They do not question her authority, nor do they seem capable of imagining life without her. This devotion is often portrayed as love, but it can also be read as conditioning. If their very existence was engineered by Bubblegum, then their loyalty may not be chosen but ingrained. This possibility casts their joy in a more unsettling light. Are the candy people truly happy, or are they simply incapable of imagining unhappiness under her rule? This tension is amplified during the elemental crisis, when Oo is reshaped into elemental harmony. The candy element overwhelms everything, assimilating all beings into endlessly smiling candy citizens. This perfect candy world is horrifying precisely because it reveals the dark potential of candy innocence. Conflict is gone, individuality erased, and freedom dissolved into sugar. The candy element's desire for cohesion becomes suffocating conformity. In this vision, the Candy Kingdom's dark side is not hidden, it is magnified. The horror lies not in destruction, but in enforced happiness. For the candy people themselves, this darkness is rarely visible. They live in blissful ignorance, celebrating festivals and singing songs, while Bubblegum makes difficult choices in the background. To them, their princess is a benevolent guardian who keeps them safe. Yet to outside observers, the kingdom is more complicated. Finn and Jake, for instance, often see the cracks in Bubblegum's control. They question her decisions, sometimes resisting her authoritarian methods. To them, the Candy People's innocence is worth protecting, but not at the cost of freedom. This outsider perspective reminds us that the sweetness of Candy Society is maintained by choices that are not always sweet. The dark side of the Candy Kingdom does not diminish its significance, but deepens it. Adventure Time consistently presents its characters and societies with complexity, refusing to reduce them to simple archetypes. The Candy People are not merely comic relief or symbols of innocence. They are participants in a society that thrives on paradox. Their joy is real, but it coexists with control. Their fragility is genuine, but it is managed through authoritarian oversight. Their loyalty is heartfelt, but it may also be engineered. The darkness of Candy civilization lies not in malice, but in the compromises necessary for survival. In the end, the Candy Kingdom's dark side is inseparable from its sweetness. The two exist together, like sugar and bitterness in a single flavor. Without control, the kingdom would collapse under the weight of its citizens' fragility. Without manipulation, dissent would fracture its unity. Yet without joy, celebration, and love, it would lose the very qualities that make it worth saving. The Candy People endure because their society balances on this knife's edge, upheld by Bubblegum's genius and authority. Their history is not simply one of sweetness, but of sweetness shadowed by necessity. If Princess Bubblegum's creation of the Candy People marked the beginning of their civilization, then the Gumbald Uprising was its first great fracture. For all her intelligence and vision, Bubblegum was not the only being to emerge from the Mother Gum. Her Uncle Gumbald, along with Aunt Lolly and Cousin Chickle, shared the same primordial origin, and with them came competing visions of what Candy civilization should be. Their eventual rebellion against Bubblegum was not a minor quarrel, but a defining conflict that shaped the political and moral foundations of the Candy Kingdom. The uprising revealed that sweetness and unity were not the only paths for Candy Society. Ambition, hierarchy, and even tyranny were possible alternatives. At first, Gumbald and his kin appeared to share Bubblegum's genius. Unlike the simple-minded citizens she created, these three retained intelligence and agency comparable to her own. They were not innocent subjects, but potential leaders. In Gumbald's case, his ambitions quickly outpaced his niece's. Where Bubblegum sought to build a society based on joy and cohesion, Gumbald envisioned a kingdom of power, order, and expansion. His designs were grander, his methods harsher. To him, Bubblegum's Candy People were weak and pathetic, incapable of sustaining a true civilization. He believed candy life could and should be more durable, more ambitious, more like himself. This ideological divide soon became personal. Bubblegum, though brilliant, was still young, and her sense of responsibility often clashed with Gumbald's hunger for control. He saw her not as a visionary leader, but as an obstacle to his ambitions. Their conflict escalated as Gumbald began creating his own candy subjects, not to embody innocence, but to enforce obedience. These creations were sturdier, more disciplined, and more militaristic than Bubblegum's. Where she valued joy, he valued order. Where she cherished fragility as part of candy identity, he sought to erase it. The Gumbald Uprising came to a head when Gumbald challenged Bubblegum directly for control of the kingdom. His rebellion was more than a family quarrel. It was a struggle for the very soul of Candy Society. Would the Candy People remain childlike and dependent, or would they become disciplined and expansionist? The clash revealed that Candy identity was not fixed but contested. Different visions of what Candy civilization could be were already in play. Faced with this threat, Bubblegum made one of the most consequential decisions of her reign. Rather than risk losing her kingdom to Gumbald, she turned to science to neutralize him and his allies. She developed the infamous Dum Dum Juice, a potion that reverted Gumbald, Lolly, and Chickle into simple-minded Candy citizens. Stripped of their intelligence and ambition, they became harmless members of her society, their memories and agency erased. To the Candy people, the uprising ended with victory and peace. To Gumbald, it was the ultimate betrayal, a silencing of his vision, a theft of his autonomy. The Dum Dum Juice is one of the most ethically troubling elements of Adventure Time's lore. On the surface, it solved Bubblegum's problem. The rebellion ended without bloodshed, and her kingdom continued in peace. But the cost was enormous. By forcibly reducing her relatives' intelligence, she erased their identities. She did not defeat them in open conflict. She rewrote them into something else entirely. This act raises profound questions about free will, consent, and the morality of leadership. Was Bubblegum protecting her people, or was she ensuring her absolute control by eliminating rivals? The aftermath of the uprising defined the Candy Kingdom for centuries. With Gumbald, Lolly, and Chickle neutralized, Bubblegum reigned unchallenged. Her vision of Candy society, innocent, fragile, and dependent, became the default. The Candy people grew accustomed to their roles, never knowing that alternative paths had been erased from their history. Bubblegum herself moved forward, burying the memory of the uprising and presenting her kingdom as a harmonious whole. To her citizens, there had never been a fracture. To Bubblegum, the cost of remembering was too high. Yet the consequences lingered. Gumbald never forgave her. Even in his diminished form, he retained a seed of resentment, waiting for the chance to return. His eventual restoration during the events leading up to Come Along With Me proved that suppressed conflicts never vanish entirely. The uprising was not only a moment of rebellion, but the beginning of a long cycle of betrayal, suppression, and revenge. The Candy Kingdom's apparent stability was always shadowed by this unresolved fracture. Thematically, the Gumbald uprising highlights the darker side of Candy civilization. It exposes the authoritarian nature of Bubblegum's rule, showing that her love for her people often justified morally questionable actions. By erasing her relatives' autonomy, she preserved her vision of sweetness but also silenced dissent. The Candy people's innocence was, in part, manufactured through this act. Their joy existed because alternative possibilities were forcibly removed. In this sense, the Candy Kingdom's harmony rests on a foundation of control. The uprising also demonstrates the dangers of ambition within Candy society. Gumbald's vision was not inherently evil. He sought to strengthen Candy civilization, to make it less fragile and more respected. But his methods, authoritarian and domineering, mirrored the very traits he condemned in Bubblegum. Both leaders believed they knew what was best, and both were willing to reshape their people to achieve it. The difference lay in their goals. Bubblegum sought joy. Gumbald sought power. Yet in their methods, they were more alike than either would admit. For the Candy people themselves, the uprising was invisible. Their childlike simplicity prevented them from fully grasping the conflict. To them, the disappearance of dissent was seamless, folded into their daily routines. They did not know that their princess had silenced her own family to protect them. This ignorance underscores their role in Candy society. blissfully unaware of the sacrifices and compromises that preserve their sweetness. Their innocence is real, but it is also curated. When Gumbald eventually returned in the modern timeline, the echoes of the uprising reverberated once more. His hatred for bubblegum was not the product of recent events, but centuries of suppressed resentment. His rebellion in Come Along With Me was not only a grab for power, but a continuation of the original uprising. To him, the Candy Kingdom was not a beacon of joy, but a prison built on stolen autonomy. His return forced bubblegum and the Candy people to confront the shadows of their own history. In the end, the Gumbald uprising reveals that even the sweetest of civilizations is not free from fracture. Candy society, often portrayed as innocent and harmonious, was born in conflict. Its apparent stability is the product of choices that silenced dissent and enforced a singular vision of what candy life should be. The Candy people's joy is real, but it is joy maintained through compromise, manipulation, and suppression. The uprising stands as a reminder that no kingdom, however sweet, is without its shadows. For centuries, the Candy Kingdom appeared peaceful and secure. Its people lived in joy, oblivious to the darker truths of their history, while Princess Bubblegum maintained her vision of a fragile but enduring society. Yet the past, as always in Ooh, refuses to remain buried. The Gumbald uprising, long forgotten by the citizens and repressed by Bubblegum herself, resurfaces in the most dramatic way possible: the return of Uncle Gumbald. His re-emergence in the later seasons of Adventure Time not only reignites old wounds, but forces the Candy people to confront the suppressed fractures in their society. The return of Gumbald transforms the kingdom's story from one of stability to one of reckoning, as the shadow of the past collides with the fragility of the present. The seeds of Gumbald's return are tied to the shifting balance of Ooh during the Elements and Come Along With Me arcs. As new threats emerge, from elemental upheavals to the rise of Golb, the Candy Kingdom becomes a focal point of both power and vulnerability. It is within this context of instability that Gumbald, Lolly and Chickle reappear, no longer the simple-minded dum-dums Bubblegum had reduced them to, but restored to their full intelligence and ambition. Their reawakening is both shocking and inevitable. The unfinished business of the uprising was always destined to resurface. For Bubblegum, Gumbald's return is more than a political crisis. It is a deeply personal reckoning. She had silenced her uncle with science, erasing his autonomy to preserve her kingdom. Now, that decision comes back to haunt her. Gumbald wastes no time in reminding her, and the audience, of the injustice done to him. His hatred is not the product of delusion, but of lived betrayal. To him, Bubblegum is not a benevolent ruler, but a usurper who stole his future and reshaped him against his will. His vengeance is not only political, but personal, aimed at reclaiming the power and dignity that was stripped from him. The restored Gumbald immediately sets about rebuilding his vision of Candy society. He presents himself not merely as a rival monarch, but as an alternative leader for the Candy people. His rhetoric is laced with promises of strength, discipline, and grandeur, a stark contrast to Bubblegum's vision of innocence and dependence. He sees the Candy people not as fragile citizens to be coddled, but as resources to be moulded into something greater. His philosophy echoes authoritarian impulses, but unlike Bubblegum, he does not disguise them with sweetness. He embraces ambition openly, seeking to expand and dominate rather than merely protect. The Candy people themselves, however, are largely caught in the middle. Their loyalty to Princess Bubblegum remains absolute, the product of both devotion and conditioning. They cannot conceive of life under another ruler, let alone one as harsh as Gumbold. Yet their innocence also makes them vulnerable to manipulation. Gumbold understands this and seeks to exploit their naivety, positioning himself as a visionary who can lead them to strength. While most Candy citizens cling to bubblegum, the possibility of dissent lingers, exposing the fragility of their unity. The conflict between Bubblegum and Gumbold escalates into open confrontation. Gumbold rallies his allies, Lolly and Chickle among them, and wages psychological as well as physical war against his niece. Their clashes are not merely battles of armies, but debates over the future of Candy civilization. Should the Candy people remain innocent and dependent, or should they embrace strength and ambition? These questions, once silenced by Dum Dum Juice, now resurface with full force. The kingdom itself becomes a stage for this unresolved ideological struggle. One of the most striking aspects of Gumbold's return is how it reframes Bubblegum's legacy. To the Candy people, she has always been the flawless guardian of their world. To the audience, however, Gumbold's accusations force a re-evaluation. Bubblegum's use of Dum Dum Juice, her authoritarian instincts, and her willingness to sacrifice autonomy for stability are no longer abstract ethical dilemmas. They are living consequences, embodied in her uncle's fury. Gumbold is both villain and victim, a reminder that Bubblegum's benevolence is not without its costs. The stakes of this conflict rise dramatically during the events of Come Along With Me, when Gumbold positions himself as a central antagonist. He aligns with forces that threaten the stability of all Ooh, using his ambition to escalate the war. His actions demonstrate the danger of suppressed history. What is not resolved festers, and when it resurfaces, it does so explosively. For the Candy people, the war becomes both external and internal. They are defending their kingdom not only from outside enemies, but from their own history made flesh. Yet, even as Gumbold wages war, cracks appear in his own camp. Lolly, once his ally, grows disillusioned with his methods. She recognizes the destructive nature of his ambition and eventually turns against him, siding with Bubblegum in the climactic moments of the finale. This betrayal underscores the instability of Gumbold's vision. Unlike Bubblegum, whose citizens' loyalty is unwavering, Gumbold cannot inspire true devotion. His rule is built on fear and resentment rather than love, making it fragile despite its apparent strength. The climax of Gumbold's story comes when he attempts to turn the Dum Dum Juice back on Bubblegum, seeking to reduce her to the same simple-minded state he once endured. Yet in a poetic reversal, he becomes the victim of his own weapon. Spilled upon himself, the Dum Dum Juice reverts him once more, undoing his restoration. His second fall mirrors his first, a reminder that his ambition, however fiery, cannot overcome the forces of destiny and irony that govern Ooh. His return ends not in triumph, but in the same state from which it began, silenced, diminished, and undone. For the Candy people, the return of Gumbold is a story they will never fully comprehend. Their innocence shields them from the deeper truths of their kingdom's history. They see only that their princess triumphed once again, preserving their sweetness. Yet beneath their joy lies the unspoken reality that their stability was nearly shattered by a family feud older than their memories. They celebrate peace without realizing how close they came to being reshaped by Gumbold's ambition. For Bubblegum, however, the consequences are profound. Gumbold's return forces her to confront the moral weight of her past choices. She cannot dismiss his accusations, even if she rejects his vision. His rebellion demonstrates that her control, however effective, is not absolute. The Candy Kingdom's stability rests not only on her intelligence, but also on the fragile acceptance of a history she cannot erase. In defeating Gumbald again, she preserves her people, but she also reaffirms the compromises that have always defined her rule. Thematically, Gumbald's return underscores Adventure Time's exploration of history, memory, and consequence. The Candy Kingdom, often portrayed as innocent and whimsical, is revealed to be built on suppressed conflicts. Its sweetness is real, but it is not pure. It coexists with shadows that, when ignored, return to haunt it. Gumbald is more than an antagonist. He is the embodiment of unresolved history, the ghost of choices past. His reappearance forces both Bubblegum and the audience to reckon with the costs of her vision. In the end, Gumbald's return is not merely a story of revenge, but a lesson in the persistence of the past. No matter how carefully Bubblegum crafted her kingdom, no matter how sweetly her citizens lived, the fractures of its foundation could not be silenced forever. The Candy People's history is not only one of joy and resilience, but also of betrayal, rebellion, and reckoning. Gumbald's return ensures that this truth cannot be ignored. The Candy Kingdom had weathered many storms before: monster attacks, Ice King's kidnappings, even the return of Gumbald. Yet nothing in their long history compared to the upheaval of the elemental crisis. Triggered by the reawakening of Patience Street, Pym, and the destabilization of Oo's elemental balance, the crisis thrust the Candy People into the center of a transformation that revealed the terrifying potential of their elemental nature. For the first time, the Candy People were not merely threatened by outside forces. They became the threat themselves. The elemental crisis begins with the revelation that Princess Bubblegum is more than just a scientist and ruler. She is the current incarnation of the Candy Elemental, the living embodiment of Candy essence in Oo. Just as Flame Princess represents fire, Slime Princess represents slime, and Patience Street Pym embodies ice, Bubblegum is the vessel of candy. This truth, hinted at for years, comes to the forefront as elemental energies begin to spiral out of control. When Patience manipulates the balance, Candy does not merely survive, it expands, consuming everything around it. For the Candy People, this transformation is both a blessing and a curse. On the surface, it appears to fulfill their deepest desires. Candy spreads across Oo, converting other beings into candy citizens. Wolves become gummy wolves, humans become gumdrop people, and even hardened warriors find themselves smiling with candy cheer. The kingdom no longer needs to fear outside threats, because everything outside has become part of them. For a moment, the Candy People live in what seems like paradise, a world where danger no longer exists, because difference itself has been erased. But beneath this saccharine surface lies horror. The candy element, when unleashed, is not simply about joy and cohesion. It is about assimilation. Individuality, freedom, and even conflict vanish in a flood of sugar. Beings transformed into Candy People lose their personalities, reduced to endlessly cheerful citizens with no memory of their former lives. The Candy Kingdom becomes not just a kingdom, but the entire world. What was once a fragile society protected by walls is now a suffocating blanket covering everything. For Princess Bubblegum, the elemental crisis is a revelation of both power and danger. She witnesses firsthand the consequences of her elemental identity. All her life, she believed her role as ruler was one of choice and responsibility. Now she sees that her very existence is bound to a cosmic force that seeks to spread itself without limit. The candy element's potential for sweetness is undeniable, but so is its potential for tyranny. In the elemental crisis, Bubblegum is no longer simply a protector of her people. She is the agent of their transformation into something monstrous. For the Candy People themselves, assimilation into a global candy utopia seems natural. Their childlike innocence and loyalty make them the perfect vessels for elemental spread. Once transformed, they do not resist. They smile, sing, and live in ignorant bliss. To them, the crisis is not a catastrophe, but a fulfillment of their nature. Yet this very acceptance underscores the tragedy of their condition. Their happiness is real, but it comes at the cost of their individuality. The candy people's innocence, once endearing, becomes the mechanism of their own erasure. The elemental crisis also highlights the contrast between candy and the other elements. Fire, when unleashed, burns with destructive passion. Ice freezes all life into stasis. Slime absorbs and consumes without end. Candy, by comparison, is gentle in method, but equally devastating in effect. It does not kill or burn. It assimilates. Its tyranny is not violent but cheerful. This makes it in some ways the most insidious of the elements. Where fire and ice inspire fear, candy inspires complacency. The horror of the crisis lies not in destruction, but in enforced happiness. Finn and Jake, as outsiders, recognize this horror more clearly than the candy people themselves. To them, watching their friends and allies transformed into smiling candy citizens is deeply unsettling. They see that what appears to be paradise is actually loss of freedom, of individuality, of the very diversity that makes Ooh vibrant. Their struggle against the elemental crisis is not simply a fight for survival, but a fight for the preservation of difference. In resisting candy assimilation, they resist the erasure of what makes Ooh unique. Peppermint Butler's role during the crisis adds another layer of complexity. As one of Bubblegum's most loyal servants, he accepts the transformations with little resistance. To him, the expansion of candy is not horrifying, but inevitable. His loyalty blinds him to the ethical consequences, showing how deeply ingrained devotion to Bubblegum and the candy ideal is within the kingdom. Even when candy innocence becomes tyranny, the structures of loyalty remain intact. The elemental crisis also reveals the fragility of the candy people's supposed autonomy. For years, viewers debated whether their innocence was natural or engineered. The crisis tilts the answer toward the latter. Their readiness to accept assimilation, their lack of resistance, suggests that their personalities are less the result of choice and more the result of elemental design. The candy people were always susceptible to this kind of domination because it aligns with their nature. The crisis does not distort them, it amplifies what was already there. When the balance is finally restored and Ooh returns to its previous state, the candy people revert to their normal forms. To them, the crisis seems like a fleeting dream, another strange adventure in the chaotic history of their kingdom. They do not dwell on the implications. They return to their festivals, their gossip, their devotion to Bubblegum. But for those who witnessed the transformation, the memory lingers. The Candy Kingdom's innocence can no longer be taken at face value. Beneath its sweetness lies the potential for suffocating conformity, a truth that will never fully disappear. Thematically, the elemental crisis serves as the ultimate expression of the candy people's paradox. They are fragile yet resilient, innocent yet unsettling, sweet yet capable of tyranny. Their very nature embodies cohesion, and when that cohesion is amplified to elemental extremes, it becomes assimilation. The crisis reveals that the line between joy and oppression is thinner than anyone realized. Candy's sweetness, unchecked, is not liberation, but domination. For Princess Bubblegum, the crisis is a personal reckoning. She is forced to acknowledge that her authority and her identity are not only products of her genius, but of cosmic destiny. She is Candy itself, and Candy's potential for tyranny lies within her. This realization complicates her relationship with her people. She can no longer see herself solely as their protector. She must also confront the possibility that she is their greatest danger. Her struggle to balance love, control, and responsibility takes on new urgency in the wake of the crisis. For the Candy people, the crisis changes little on the surface, but everything in the subtext. They remain the same cheerful, fragile citizens they always were, but their innocence now carries a darker undertone. Viewers cannot see them without remembering that this innocence, if magnified, becomes erasure. Their smiles are sweet, but they are also a reminder of how close sweetness can come to suffocation. In the broader history of Wu, the elemental crisis positions the Candy Kingdom not just as one kingdom among many, but as a cosmic force with the power to reshape the entire world. The Candy people are no longer merely comic relief or symbols of innocence. They are the vessels of an elemental destiny as dangerous as fire, ice, or slime. Their history is not just about survival, but about the balance of the world itself. In the end, the elemental crisis reveals the deepest truth of the Candy people, that their sweetness is both their strength and their peril. They are fragile, joyous, and loyal, but they also embody a force that, unchecked, consumes everything in sugar. The crisis may have ended, but its lesson endures. The Candy people remind us that even the gentlest of elements can become terrifying when unleashed, and that innocence, however sweet, must always be tempered by freedom. The Candy Kingdom had survived monsters, invasions, and even the cosmic reshaping of the elemental crisis. Yet as the events of Adventure Time reached their climax, the kingdom was drawn into one final, defining conflict: the War for Wu. This war was not simply a battle of armies, but a collision of histories, ambitions, and elemental forces. For the Candy people, it was both the gravest threat to their survival and the clearest demonstration of their place in the fate of the world. Fragile though they were, their kingdom became the stage upon which the final struggles of Wu were fought. The seeds of the War for Wu were planted in the return of Gumbald. Having regained his intelligence and ambition, Gumbald sought not merely to reclaim what Bubblegum had taken from him centuries ago, but to reshape Wu itself in his image. His vision of Candy civilization, disciplined, expansionist, and authoritarian, stood in stark contrast to Bubblegum's protective, paternalistic model. The conflict between niece and uncle was not just familial, it was ideological. It posed a question that had haunted the Candy Kingdom since its inception. Should Candy society remain innocent and dependent, or should it embrace strength and ambition at the cost of its sweetness? Gumbald wasted no time in transforming his vision into military force. He created an army of new Candy constructs, stronger and more disciplined than the naive citizens of Bubblegum's realm. Where her banana guards stumbled in confusion, his soldiers marched with precision. Where her people panicked at the first sign of danger, his were built for war. To the Candy people, who had lived their lives in festivals and cheer, the sight of Gumbald's forces was terrifying. For the first time, they were confronted not with monsters or elemental disasters, but with the possibility of conquest from their own kin. Princess Bubblegum responded with her characteristic combination of science and strategy. She fortified the kingdom, rallied her citizens, and prepared for war. Yet the burden weighed heavily on her. She knew her people were fragile, incapable of true combat. Their loyalty was absolute, but their bodies were too weak for battle. To send them into open conflict would be to send them to certain death. This forced her to rely once again on external allies. Finn, Jake, Marceline, and others who could fight in ways her citizens could not. The Candy people would endure the war not through their own strength, but through the protection of those stronger than themselves. Still, the Candy people were not entirely passive. Though they could not stand as warriors, their presence gave meaning to the war. Every battle, every sacrifice was fought with their survival in mind. They became the stakes of the conflict, the fragile heart of U, whose preservation justified the struggle. To destroy the Candy Kingdom would be to erase joy, innocence, and community from the world. Their very vulnerability made them invaluable. In this sense, the Candy people were not combatants but symbols, the reason the war mattered at all. The war for U was not fought in isolation. It drew in the other kingdoms and forces of U, each aligning with one vision or another. Marceline stood firmly with Bubblegum, her bond with the princess solidifying into open loyalty and affection. Her power as a vampire and musician became a crucial counterweight to Gumbald's militarism. Flame Princess and her Fire Kingdom also played a role, their elemental passion contrasting with Candy fragility. Even Ice King, whose history tied him more to tragedy than to strategy, found himself woven into the broader tapestry of the conflict. The war was not simply Candy versus Gumbald. It was the fate of U distilled into one climactic struggle. For the Candy people themselves, life during the war was defined by fear and confusion. Their festivals and parades gave way to barricades and watchtowers. Their cheerful gossip turned to anxious whispers about Gumbald's army. The Banana Guards patrolled constantly, their incompetence laid bare by the seriousness of the threat. And yet, even in the midst of war, the Candy people clung to their innocence. They panicked when danger loomed, but once reassured, they returned to their routines. This oscillation between fear and joy underscored their resilience. They were not made for war, but they endured it by holding on to the sweetness that defined them. The climax of the war for U came in the Come Along With Me finale, where Gumbald's ambitions collided with Bubblegum's defences in a massive confrontation. The Candy Kingdom became the battlefield, its frosting walls and gumdrop towers caught in the crossfire of armies, magic, and elemental forces. For the Candy people, this was both the worst moment of their history and the moment that defined their survival. Their kingdom burned, crumbled, and shook, but they endured. The war also revealed the psychological toll on Princess Bubblegum. For centuries, she had carried the weight of her people's survival, often at great personal cost. Now, facing her uncle once more, she was forced to reckon with the consequences of her past decisions. The dum-dum juice that had silenced him centuries ago returned as both weapon and symbol. Gumbald's attempt to use it against her highlighted the cyclical nature of their conflict, a struggle born of family, perpetuated by science and concluded by irony. When the dum-dum juice backfired, reducing him once again to his diminished state, the war ended not in triumph, but in tragic symmetry. Yet even in victory, the Candy Kingdom's fragility was laid bare. Their survival depended not on their own strength, but on the sacrifices of others. Finn and Jake's interventions, Marceline's power, and even the shifting allegiances of Gumbald's allies were decisive. The Candy people themselves played little role in combat, but they played every role in meaning. They were the reason the war was fought, the fragile innocence that heroes and rulers alike sought to preserve. The war for U also introduced the cosmic presence of Golb, whose destructive arrival overshadowed even Gumbald's ambitions. For the Candy people, this was a crisis beyond comprehension. Their screams and panic reflected their inability to grasp the magnitude of the cosmic threat. Yet their presence on the battlefield underscored what was at stake. Even in the face of annihilation, their survival represented hope. If the Candy people could endure Golb, then U itself could endure. Thematically, the war for U crystallized the paradox of Candy civilization. The Candy people were weak, fragile, and dependent, yet they were central to the fate of the world. Their innocence was both their weakness and their strength. In protecting them, the heroes of U affirmed that sweetness, however fragile, is worth defending. The war was not about conquest or territory, but about preserving joy against the forces that sought to dominate or erase it. When the dust settled and peace returned, the Candy Kingdom stood scarred but intact. Its citizens, true to their nature, quickly resumed their celebrations, as though the war were only a passing storm. Their resilience was not in their ability to fight, but in their ability to return to joy. The war had shaken their foundations, but it had not erased their sweetness. They endured, as they always had, by being what they were: fragile, innocent, and resiliently joyful. For Princess Bubblegum, the war for U marked both an end and a beginning. It ended the cycle of conflict with Gumbald, silencing him once and for all, but it also began a new era of self-reflection. She could no longer deny the authoritarian aspects of her rule, nor the fragility of her people. The war forced her to confront her flaws and her responsibilities, not only as ruler, but as elemental. Her bond with Marceline, solidified in the finale, provided a personal anchor to balance her public duties. For the Candy people, this meant a future where their princess was no longer defined solely by control, but also by love. In the end, the war for U was the defining crucible of Candy history. It brought together every thread of their past: the Gumbald uprising, the elemental crisis, the fragility of their existence, and the paradox of their innocence, into one final confrontation. The Candy people survived not because they were strong, but because others believed their survival mattered. Their kingdom remained not a fortress of might, but a symbol of sweetness worth saving. In this way, the war for U affirmed the Candy people's legacy: fragile, dependent, and innocent, yet central to the heart of U. The war for U brought the Candy people to the brink of destruction. Their walls had cracked, their innocence had been shaken, and their ruler had been forced to confront both personal and political reckonings. Yet when the dust settled, when Gumbald was defeated, and when even the cosmic threat of Golb passed, the Candy Kingdom endured. This survival was not just another chapter in their long history, but the beginning of a new era. In the aftermath of the finale, the Candy people entered a stage defined not by imminent threats or elemental crises, but by resilience, continuity, and quiet hope. From the earliest days of their creation, the Candy people had always been fragile, and their survival often depended on the vigilance of Princess Bubblegum. The finale, however, revealed that their endurance was not only the product of her control, but also the product of their own ability to recover. When Golb's chaos warped the very fabric of U, countless beings were transformed, destroyed, or displaced. Yet in the epilogue, we see the Candy people alive, well, and celebrating. Their kingdom stands, their community continues. For all their fragility, they outlasted one of the greatest apocalyptic events their world had ever seen. The epilogue scenes of Adventure Time emphasize this endurance. While other characters wander, transform, or depart into unknown futures, the Candy people remain rooted. They gather in their kingdom, celebrating peace with the same joy and innocence that defined them from the start. This continuity is not trivial. It reflects the central truth of their society. No matter how often they are threatened, they always return to sweetness. They scream when danger strikes, but they sing when it passes. Their resilience is not in arms or strategy, but in their ability to resume joy after trauma. Princess Bubblegum's survival is inseparable from theirs. In the aftermath of the war, she emerges not only as their ruler, but as a figure transformed by her experiences. Her relationship with Marceline, now openly affirmed, marks a shift in her personal life that directly impacts her rule. Where once her authority was defined by control, secrecy, and a willingness to suppress dissent, it now carries the balance of partnership, vulnerability, and trust. For the Candy People, this means a future where their princess governs not only from responsibility, but from love. Her bond with Marceline stabilizes her, softening her authoritarian edge without diminishing her protective instinct. The survival of the Candy People after the finale also demonstrates the strength of community. Unlike other kingdoms, the Fire Kingdom, often torn by internal strife, the Ice Kingdom, whose ruler fell into madness, or the Slime Kingdom, prone to chaotic absorption, the Candy Kingdom endured precisely because of its cohesion. Their unity, born from innocence and loyalty, made them resilient in ways that armies and weapons could not replicate. Even when faced with cosmic destruction, their collective spirit allowed them to rebuild. Their fragility made them vulnerable, but their cohesion made them unbreakable. For the Candy People themselves, life after the finale returns quickly to normal rhythms. Festivals resume, gossip spreads, and the streets once again fill with music and laughter. Their childlike innocence reasserts itself, as though the horrors of war were only a bad dream. While this might seem like forgetfulness, it is also resilience. The Candy People's ability to forget trauma allows them to live joyfully in the present. Unlike other beings in Oo who brood on loss, the Candy People move forward. This capacity to return to joy is not ignorance, but survival strategy. In a world where apocalypse is always looming, their innocence is their shield. Thematically, their survival underscores one of Adventure Time's central messages. Life continues. No matter how vast the threats, liches, vampires, elemental catastrophes, or even cosmic entropy, communities endure through love, joy, and resilience. The Candy People embody this truth more than any other group. Their kingdom is not defined by conquest or dominance, but by continuity. Their survival is not dramatic, but steady, a reminder that the end of one story is always the beginning of another. The presence of Peppermint Butler in the epilogue further highlights this continuity. His dual nature, loyal servant on the surface, occult practitioner beneath, represents the complexity that persists in Candy society. Even after the war, secrets remain, and not every citizen fits neatly into innocence. Yet his continued existence proves that the Candy Kingdom accepts both light and shadow within its borders. Survival does not mean perfection, but adaptation. The kingdom continues not by erasing complexity, but by integrating it. For Princess Bubblegum, the post-finale era offers a chance to redefine her legacy. The Gumball conflict, the elemental crisis, and the war forced her to confront the costs of authoritarianism. Now, with peace restored, she has the opportunity to govern with a lighter hand. Her relationship with Marceline provides her with balance, reminding her that leadership need not mean isolation. This shift has direct consequences for the Candy People. Their survival is no longer contingent solely on a ruler who micromanages their lives, but on a community guided by a leader who embraces love and partnership. In comparison to other kingdoms, the Candy Kingdom's survival is particularly striking. The Fire Kingdom remains volatile, shaped by passion and conflict. The Ice Kingdom is reshaped entirely, with the death of Ice King and the rebirth of Simon Petrikov leaving its future uncertain. The Slime Kingdom persists in its chaotic way, but its cohesion is always unstable. Against this backdrop, the Candy Kingdom shines as the most enduring of Oo's civilizations. Its survival is not only a narrative choice, but a thematic statement. Sweetness, though fragile, is one of the strongest forces in the world. The Candy people's survival also has implications for the future of Oo. Their kingdom becomes a stable anchor in a land still healing from cosmic trauma. As other societies rebuild or reinvent themselves, the Candy Kingdom remains a place of refuge. Adventurers, wanderers, and citizens of other lands can look to its frosting walls and see not only a kingdom, but a promise. That joy can survive chaos, that sweetness can outlast destruction. Perhaps most importantly, the survival of the Candy people affirms their symbolic role. Throughout Adventure Time, they function as the moral anchor of Oo. Protecting them gives heroes purpose. Preserving them gives rulers responsibility. Their continued existence after the finale ensures that this anchor remains intact. Even as Finn grows older, even as Marceline embraces her future, even as Simon seeks redemption, the Candy people remain innocent, fragile, but enduring. They are the reminder that all battles, no matter how cosmic, are fought for the sake of ordinary lives. In the end, the Candy people's survival beyond the finale is not about their strength, but about their constancy. They endure not because they are powerful, but because they are sweet. Their kingdom continues not because it is invulnerable, but because it is loved. Their story does not end with the finale, but flows quietly into the future, reminding viewers that joy, however fragile, is worth preserving. In a world of chaos and change, the Candy people remain a constant, singing, dancing, and celebrating life one sweet day at a time. By the end of Adventure Time, when wars have been fought, kingdoms shaken, and even cosmic forces confronted, the Candy people remain. Their story is not the loudest or most dramatic in Oo, but it is one of the most enduring. From their primordial origins in the Mother Gum to their survival in the epilogue after the War for Oo, the Candy people's history reveals a legacy far greater than their childlike innocence might suggest. Their existence embodies the paradoxes of fragility and resilience, innocence and control, sweetness and shadow. To understand their legacy is to understand why the Candy Kingdom stands not only as a whimsical location in a fantastical world, but as a central symbol of what makes Adventure Time so profound. The first aspect of their legacy lies in their embodiment of the candy element itself. Unlike the fire, ice, or slime peoples, whose elemental natures often manifest in destructive or chaotic ways, the Candy people present their element in its most approachable form. They are sweetness personified, cheerful, colourful, and full of community spirit. Yet the elemental crisis revealed that this sweetness, unchecked, could overwhelm Oo in suffocating assimilation. Their legacy, therefore, is a reminder that every element, no matter how gentle, contains both gifts and dangers. Candy brings joy, but it can also erase individuality. Their very existence keeps alive the lesson that comfort and conformity must be balanced with freedom. Their second legacy is their role as the heart of Oo's innocence. Throughout the series, the Candy people serve as the moral stakes for nearly every conflict. When Ice King kidnaps Bubblegum, it matters not only because of the princess herself, but because her absence threatens her fragile people. When the Lich rises, when vampires return, when Gumball schemes, the Candy people are always the ones most at risk. They are the reason Finn, Jake and others fight so hard. Protecting them becomes shorthand for protecting joy and life itself. In this sense, their legacy is not measured in their own deeds, but in what others are willing to do for them. They are the embodiment of what must be saved. Yet their innocence is not merely a narrative device. It is also a thematic statement. The Candy People remind us that even in a world scarred by apocalypse, laughter and playfulness persist. Their festivals, gossip, and childlike antics offer a vision of life worth defending. Without them, Ooo would be reduced to endless wars, tragedies, and existential crises. Their legacy is the insistence that sweetness matters, that civilization is not only about survival but about joy. At the same time, the Candy People's history reveals a third legacy, the complicated morality of their creation and governance. Princess Bubblegum's role as their creator blurs the line between ruler and engineer. Her use of dum-dum juice against Gumbold, her experiments with clones and constructs, and her authoritarian tendencies highlight the uneasy foundation of Candy society. The Candy People's loyalty, while genuine, is also shaped by their origins. Their innocence may be engineered as much as it is chosen. This darker truth does not negate their joy, but complicates it. Their legacy, therefore, includes a cautionary dimension, a reminder that even benevolent control carries costs. The Gumbold Uprising and its echoes in the War for Ooo emphasize this legacy of contested identity. Candy civilization could have followed Gumbold's path, one of strength, discipline, and expansion. Bubblegum's vision prevailed, but only by silencing alternatives. The Candy People's legacy is thus inseparable from the questions of free will, autonomy, and authority. They are sweet, but their sweetness is curated. They endure, but their endurance comes with shadows. Their history warns that innocence is never simple. It is often the product of deliberate choices. Cinnamon Bun's journey offers another dimension to their legacy. Once dismissed as half-baked comic relief, he matures into independence and wisdom after absorbing fire. His transformation demonstrates that Candy People are not static. They can grow, change, and even transcend their origins. His arc leaves behind a legacy of hope for Candy society, that even the most fragile and underestimated can become strong, and that Candy innocence need not be eternal naivety. Through Cinnamon Bun, the Candy People's history gains a story of redemption and growth that broadens their identity beyond fragility. Peppermint Butler, too, contributes to their legacy in his own peculiar way. Outwardly loyal and sweet, he secretly masters the darkest of magics. His double life suggests that Candy innocence can coexist with unsettling depths. His survival into the epilogue confirms that Candy society is not free from complexity, and indeed that complexity can coexist with sweetness. His legacy adds nuance to the Candy People's image, showing that their innocence does not preclude cunning, knowledge, or even darkness. The elemental crisis cements perhaps the most profound legacy of the Candy People, the revelation that sweetness, when amplified, becomes suffocation. This vision of an Ooo consumed by candy, where all beings smile in mindless cheer, lingers as one of the most chilling images in the series. It ensures that the Candy People's legacy is not only one of joy, but also of caution. Their existence reminds us that even the gentlest of forces can become oppressive if unchecked. The balance between joy and freedom, comfort and individuality is delicate, and Candy's legacy is the clearest expression of that truth. Surviving the finale, the Candy People leave behind a legacy of resilience through continuity. When kingdoms fell, when rulers perished, when even cosmic beings shifted, the Candy Kingdom endured. Their fragility could have spelled their end, but instead it became their strength. Because they were fragile, others protected them. Because they were innocent, others valued them. Their survival is not accidental, but earned through the love and loyalty of their princess and allies. Their legacy is that of endurance. The softest kingdom in Oo outlasted even the greatest threats. In the epilogue, the Candy People's continued celebrations highlight their legacy as symbols of life moving forward. They do not dwell on the traumas of war or the threats of the past. They return to joy, to community, to song and laughter. This ability to move forward is not ignorance, but wisdom of a different kind. The wisdom of choosing sweetness in a world that so often tempts despair. Their legacy is not grand monuments or epic conquests, but the simple, powerful continuation of joy. Comparisons to other kingdoms sharpen this legacy further. The Fire Kingdom burns with passion, but risks destruction from within. The Ice Kingdom collapses under the weight of its tragic ruler. The Slime Kingdom thrives in chaos, but lacks cohesion. Against these, the Candy Kingdom's stability stands out. Its people are fragile, but their community is strong. Their legacy is not dominance, but survival. They prove that the gentlest society can endure as long as it remains united and loved. Ultimately, the Candy People's legacy is unity through sweetness. They embody the possibility of joy after apocalypse, of innocence after war, of continuity after chaos. They remind us that civilization is not measured only in power or conquest, but in the ability to nurture life worth living. Their songs, their festivals, their gossip, and their unwavering devotion to one another and their princess form the fabric of a society that has endured against all odds. Adventure Time ends not with the destruction of the Candy Kingdom, but with its survival. This final image is deliberate. In a show obsessed with cycles of destruction and rebirth, with existential dread and cosmic horror, the Candy People endure as proof that sweetness can last. Their legacy is not the absence of darkness, but the insistence that light matters more. They are fragile, yes. They are naive, yes. But they are also the reason Oo remains worth saving. In the end, the Candy People's legacy is both simple and profound. They are the heart of Oo, fragile, innocent, and endlessly sweet, yet central to the meaning of survival. Their story teaches that joy is not trivial but essential, that community is not weakness but strength, and that even the most fragile beings can leave behind a legacy as enduring as any hero or ruler. In their smiles, their songs, and their survival, the Candy People remind us that sweetness, however fleeting, is what holds the world together.